Rockstars, and welcome to our Colony social studies review for our big assessment coming up either at the end of this week or the beginning of next week, as you know, based upon the weather. But it is coming up, so that's why I'm making it today. I hope you're staying cozy and warm on our snow day. I'm hoping we're back in class tomorrow, but today would be a great day for you to begin to study for that. Even if you don't have the materials at home, I have a couple of resources that you can use really quickly at home without any of your materials from school. So I'm going to actually turn you over to a screen recording first so that you can see a couple of resources that I posted onto our Class Fusion page, and then we'll come back together for our traditional study session like we've had in the past. So I'm going to turn you over to the screen, and then I'll be back to see you in a second. Okay, Room 21 Rockstars, so a couple of things that I want to show you really quickly that I posted onto our Class Fusion page are on our website. So here we are on our website. I'm going to scroll down just a little bit. As you'll see, I pass all of this and I come the whole way down to the Class News section. You'll see that right here. Two big things that I posted. The first one is new today, and it's actually a site called solpass.org. You may have actually used it last year. Our school has a subscription to it. The username is Barrett1 and the password is Tiger. So if you click onto this, let me do that now, you're going to see this site. It says SOL Pass. Okay, you may actually see this. Okay, you're going to click elementary school and U.S. history to 1865, grade 5 or 6, that's what we definitely want to click on. When you get there, if you look here down the left-hand side, you're going to see all of the major topics that we've studied this year. Geography, Native American, explorers. Well, we're on the colony section. And under the colony section are incredible ways for you to study. First of all, there's a study guide. If you would like the study guide to help you, everything that we've covered is right there. Or, let me go back really quickly, you could play a couple of different games. So the first, Colonies, if you want to take a mini quiz there, you know, you could take a quiz for that. Or one that I was playing earlier, just to test this out for you guys, was actually, I believe, the colony patterns. So I hit play this game, and basically what you're doing is you're finding patterns. So the New England colonies, here I see they're describing the geography. So what described the geography of the New England colonies? Well, I know that they did not have fertile soil. I knew that they had hilly terrain, rocky soil, and limited farming. They did not have large farms, so that'd be hilly. So you're kind of comparing and contrasting a lot of like what we've been doing in class. But this is an amazing resource, guys, because they're giving us all of these different ways to study for this big test coming up, and they kind of broke it down for you into the different sections that we've studied. Now, you may have to log in, and all you're going to have to do is enter that information. So let me take us back to the Class Fusion page, because on our Class Fusion page, I have entered for you the username and the password. Now, when I first got on, all that I had to type in was the password, which is Tigers. You may have to type in the username. That is Barrett1. So, you know, this is an amazing resource to be using at home to study for our test coming up at the end of this week or the beginning of next week. If that's not working, just shoot me an email and I'll see what I can do for you to make sure that that begins to work. Something else that I've had here for a couple of weeks that I've actually been showing on the weekly vodcast is the 13 Colony study materials. This area, you're actually going to have to come down and you see geography, bodies, everything we've studied. You're going to have to come down. It's in order. Early English colonies and 13 colonies and colonial people. You can literally, guys, click on any of these, and these are going to be great ways to study as well. You know, we played some Fling the Teacher in the past. All of these things help you to review. A couple of the links do not work, but most of them do. So if it doesn't work, just go back and go to a different one. But I thought that these were pretty amazing resources as well. So I've put two different resources on our Class Fusion page. Okay, we have SOL Pass and the 13 Colony study materials. Now I'm going to turn you over back to Mr. Reichert in person so that we can go through our study session. Okay, Room 21 Rockstars, so now we're back to our actual study session, okay, and this is really just going to be like a study period that I'm going to be here with you, you know, and what I want to show you this time is I haven't pre-created anything because I want to start showing you study strategies that I just come up with, you know, on the top of my head that you can certainly do as well you can come up with different ways that help you to study best. So I just want to show you today that I have nothing ready yet. I have paper, blank paper. You might want to get some of that. I have some pens. Okay, I have a pencil in case I need it. And I have my social studies. Let me just turn around for a second. My social studies book. Okay, that's all that I have. I didn't start off with anything. Okay, and basically what I'm actually going to do is start at settling the English colonies on the first section of the book. And we're going to go down through those, make sure we have everything good there. I think since really we're going in order now for history, I think it's going to be a great strategy, guys, just to go chronologically in order of what we learned. So if you remember way back, I divided you guys into groups, and you created a poster about one of the 6 original English colonies. Okay, and we put those around the room, and we traveled around the room, and we took some notes. In your interactive notebook is a foldable. You don't have to use that. But all of those colonies are in section 1, okay? So here's what I'm going to do to start off the bat. I am simply going to take a plain sheet of paper, and I'm going to create a timeline. So let me show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to draw a line down the center of the paper. So here's my timeline so far. Now, my major objective with this timeline, because I know that these English settlements came in chronological order, they came in time order, I'm going to put those down on there, and then really the only thing that you guys need to know is who founded them and for what reason. What reason were they founded? We don't have to know all the details, all the juicy details about each of them. Although we did learn a lot of that, we really don't have to know that. So the very first English settlement, we had a debate on this, was Roanoke. So I'm going to put Roanoke Island is very first. So look how I did that. Okay, I'm just labeling my timeline. Like I said, this is something that just came right off the top of my head. I want to show you guys that you can do this at home just like that. Now, the year for Roanoke was about 1587. You guys don't have to know that, but I'm going to put it on my timeline just to help me visually to see that it is going in order. Okay, now after Roanoke, we now had what? Does anyone remember? You learned about it a ton last year. Good, Jamestown. So Roanoke was actually quite the failure, as you guys know. Okay, so the first permanent English settlement was Jamestown. So I'm going to put a star by that because I know that that was the first permanent English settlement. Roanoke, it was a bit of a failure. Now, Jamestown occurred in 1607. Like I said, you don't have to know the dates, but I am putting it on my timeline to help me visually. So we had Roanoke, we had Jamestown. Now, remember that the English are coming over at this time in history, the early 1600s, because they're at war with Spain. Okay, they were at war with Spain back home, and they wanted to become more powerful. So they said the way we can do this is to start coming over and claiming land. Now, I want you to think right now, was it easy for these guys at first, these folks in Roanoke and Jamestown? Was it really easy for them to come over? No, not at all. As we talked about with Roanoke, there are 6 different theories about why those people disappeared, because when the English came back over, they were all gone. And we know that Jamestown was not a piece of pie either. Okay, so after Jamestown, we now have Plymouth. Okay. Plymouth are the who? They're the Pilgrims, obviously, but they were also the Separatists. And I'm going to write that on my paper in parentheses by Plymouth because I think that is very, very important. Now, if you want the year, that was about 1620. Now, remember, that's up in Massachusetts. Okay, and then we have the Massachusetts Bay Colony. And these were the Puritans. Now, I really want you to spend a lot of time distinguishing, and let me actually get a highlighter right now, distinguishing the difference between, and we've talked about this a lot, the differences between separatists and Puritans. I really want you to think about that because that's a huge, huge, huge difference between those two groups of people. Okay? Think of Puritans. What word do you hear in Puritans? Think about what the word separate means. Okay? And then we had Pennsylvania, Mr. Reichard's home. And that dude who started that place, his name was William Penn, as we know. And that was in 1681. And finally, remember, this is the one that Mr. Reichert said he didn't even learn when he was in school. We have Georgia. The colony of Georgia was started in 1733. So, these are the original English colonies. And I'm actually going to write the original English colonies or settlements. And I have to say, guys, I wish we were in school. But nonetheless, Mr. Reichert still drank his coffee today and still is very energetic and planning for you guys. So the original English colonies or the settlements, right there. Okay, now that we have a timeline, there's one major question you have to answer for each of these. And that would be, why were they settled? And I'm writing that right here so I can show you it. You need to be able to answer that question, and as we talked about with your notes, why were they settled or established? So what I actually want you to do right now, and I'm going to do the same thing, is I literally want you to start with Roanoke Island, and then go to Jamestown, then Plymouth, then Massachusetts Bay, then Pennsylvania and Georgia, and either underneath or down here, write why were they established. You might want to write who established them, because sometimes that will help you. You know, especially with Plymouth and Massachusetts Bay, if you know that Plymouth was established by the Puritans, or by the Separatists, and Massachusetts Bay was established by the Puritans, then you're going to be able to say, hey, I know why that place was established. It was for religious reasons. Okay, they wanted away from the Church of England, so they came over here. So, there's our timeline with all of our information. Like I said, take some time right now to actually write why they came. And I'll put on a few tunes while you're doing so. So just bear with me. Okay, so here's what I have. I'm going to put mine up on the screen. If you still need more time, make sure you definitely pause, because it's really going to help you to the best of your advantage. As you know, if you do it first, and then you can compare your work to mine just to double check if you're unsure. But all of this information is in section 1, and it's in your interactive notebook, so it's in about 300 different places, and we've talked about it many times. We played Kaboom, all of those great things. Now, I didn't put anything under Roanoke because that was a failed establishment. It didn't quite turn out how the English thought it would. Now, really, it was probably an economic venture more so than a religious venture. They were coming over here for economic reasons and really to kind of one-up Spain, to say, hey, Spain, in your face. Okay, so then Jamestown, which is right here, was an economic venture. The Virginia Company we talked about. John Smith, you learned about all of that great stuff last year. And then we come in, we have Plymouth and Massachusetts Bay. Now, as you can see, I put religious under both of them. But there's a big difference. They were both founded for religious differences from the Church of England, but Plymouth was established by separatists. They wanted nothing to do with the Church of England. They came over and they wanted to have it their own way. Now, Massachusetts Bay were the Puritans. They were like, okay, the Church of England is okay, but we need to make a couple of parts of it more pure. We need to make it more pure, better. So they just wanted to come over and change a couple things, but they still wanted to practice a religion. Okay, and then Pennsylvania, I put a couple things here. Number one, William Penn. It was named after William Penn, as we talked about. And Pennsylvania was full of Quakers. Now, this goes into what you know about the Mid-Atlantic colonies now. We haven't made this connection yet in class. But what do we know about the Quakers? Think about it for a second. Good, yes. The Quakers didn't care what religion you were. In fact, they let any religion who wanted to come into Pennsylvania, come into Pennsylvania. These guys up here in Plymouth and Massachusetts Bay, they were a little more strict, okay? You had to follow what they were going with. But the Pennsylvania Quakers, they were okay with any religion. And that ties into the fact, remember when we looked at that graph with the Mid-Atlantic colonies? They are so diverse, the Mid-Atlantic colonies were. You had people from every stretch of Europe in the Mid-Atlantic colonies and of many different religions. That might be a reason why, because the Quakers were like, hey, you can come here regardless of religion. And then finally we have Georgia, the last colony before the 13 colonies started getting rolling, and those were the debtors. Those are the people who owed money to the king. He's like, okay, I'm going to give you a new life if you go over here and risk your life to set up a colony. So they came over here, they set up a colony, they no longer had to be in prison for the money that they owed the king, and they basically got a new life. So, like I said, you need to know these original colonies and this question. Why were they settled? Okay, we don't have to know many of the other details, but major thing, I'm going to put it right here. Let me make sure I have it all in the picture. And you can pause if you need to at this time to make sure you have all of that and are pretty solid with it. Okay, now, time to move on to the 3 regions of colonies. Okay, now as you know, we learned an awful lot with each of them. In fact, let me pull out the map that you all completed, which is in your interactive notebook. Okay, this is folded there. You have the New England, you have the Mid-Atlantic, and you have the Southern. Now, you know that Mr. Reichard, more than anything, if you memorize this, spit it on a test, and never remember it for the rest of your life, then you know Mr. Reichard's like, I didn't do my job. You know that. I say that all the time. So that's not the key here, okay? Now, based on everything we've learned so far this year, a lot of this should just automatically start coming to you based upon geography, based upon climate, and things that we've been learning, because everything is connecting together like this, if you haven't already noticed. Here is a major thing with each of these colonies, and maybe this is a foreshadowing of what you're going to have to do on the test. I should be able to say, imagine that you are a blacksmith, an artisan in the New England colonies. Tell me what your life is like. And you should be able to essentially write me an essay basically saying, here is what the weather was like, the climate. Here's what the land, the geography was like. Here's what my daily life would be like. Here is what we were able to make here. And here is what we had to trade for. Here is what we specialized in. Here is why we were interdependent on other colonies. Okay? So, you know, whatever that requires, being comfortable, being able to do so is something that's really important. So, you know, it's one thing just to memorize this and be able to spit it back out, but you know that Mr. Reichard is looking for more critical thinking than that, okay? Because this is going to be important for a very long time for you to remember, especially as we get into the American Revolution and going forth, okay? So a couple of things that I would suggest. Number one, those sites that I showed you at the beginning of this video are amazing for things like this, okay? They're excellent. A couple other things that you could do, though, if you're feeling like, I don't know if I could honestly describe what somebody's life would be like living in the colonies. And here's what I honestly would do at home, guys. I would just take a sheet of paper, and maybe actually 3 sheets of paper for this, okay? And what I am literally going to do is at the top of one, and this marker is dying. Let me try another one. At the top of one, I'm going to write New England. At the top of another sheet, I'm going to write Mid-Atlantic. And at the top of another sheet, I'm going to write Southern. Okay, so I have my 3 different regions of colonies. Now, you could choose to do this in whatever way you possibly wanted to. But right now, I'm going to write down on a sheet of paper the major things that you should know about each of these colonies, the major topics. And let me do that right now. Let me find a better marker for you guys. This one might work. Okay. Cap right there. It's Mr. Reichert's Massive Study Guide. Okay, so a couple of things you need to know about each of these regions of colonies. Number one would be geography. Okay, number two would be climate. Number three would be resources. And when I mean resources, I'm talking about the three different types like you learned back in third grade that we have been relentlessly talking about in class. Human, capital, and natural. Okay, now those kind of intertwine because if you learn the geography of a region, then the resources kind of come from that if you haven't already figured that out. Okay, then the specializations, interdependence, and finally, social and political life. So let me show you what I have composed right now. So we have geography, climate, resources, human natural capital, specializations, interdependent, and social and political life. Now, like I said, if you start here with each of these regions, a lot of these other things are going to make a ton of sense if you do so. So, I showed you a second ago the 3 pages that I made. New England, Mid-Atlantic, and Southern. Now, normally in the past, what I did for you guys was literally like drew out a diagram and I completed it as you went. I'm going to tell you a couple of things that I would do. And this kind of goes with the multiple intelligences. You know, what's your strength? That's what I would go with to study for this, okay? So there could be a couple of things. Number one, you could take each of these sheets and you could literally draw a picture. You know, you could draw Southern and put all the labels down. So for the Southern colonies, I might draw the plantation. I might try to show that what the geography was like. It was still mountainous, but there were a lot of fields, and there was good fertile soil. Okay, the climate, I might show a huge sun, and maybe the sun's dripping water to show sweat because they had long summers and short winters. Okay, and then the resources, I might try to show the different crops that they grew. I might label those. I might try to show the different types of human resources and the type of tools, the capital resources that they use. I might try to show the specializations. Remember the things, the products that they made that they were great at, that they were able to make because of the resources they had. And I might show arrows for the interdependence. How did they depend on other people to survive? What did they have to trade with? Okay, and finally, the social and the political life. You know, in the South, we talked about how they went into the counties and they would go to church a couple times a year in the county, and that was basically like the center of the town. They had a jail there, things like that. Up in New England, though, they had town meetings, and they would have these regularly. And and they voted on it. If you were a free white man who owned land, you were able to vote. Okay, and we talked about, well, what about everyone else? You know, we've talked about all of those different things. So, you could draw a picture. That'd be one way to go. Some people might prefer, my linguistic folks might simply prefer to just simply write out a list. Okay, make a bulleted list. Or maybe take this, and you may want to pause this if you want to write this down, and literally write under it, geography of this region is what? Climate of this region is what? The resources is what? Maybe you'll have somebody quiz you. Maybe you're just an auditory learner, you like to hear. Okay, maybe you'll create a song. Anything possible. Maybe you're a visual learner, so that might go with the pictures as well. I want you to find a way that works best for you. Because as these study videos start going towards the end of the year and towards your entrance into middle school, which is crazy, guys, I want you to find a way to study because, you know, your middle school teachers probably aren't going to make these next year. So I want to try to start getting you to become more independent rather than interdependent with these videos. So that's the goal there. Okay. So take these. Take this. These are the items that you need to know about each of them. Now, you know your book. Sections 1, 2, and 3 each describe the New England, the Mid-Atlantic, and the Southern colonies really, really well. So that would be a great study tool as well. Okay, so you may want to pause the video here if you want to go ahead and work on that. All the pages, if everything I've told you to work on is completed, then you can earn yourself 8 house points if you bring it in and show it to me. So I will need to see some work for those 3 pages that I just told you about if you want the full 8 points. It's all or nothing. Okay, now, here's what I'm actually going to do. I'm going to act kind of as your quiz guide, okay, before we move on to talk about the last couple things we need to. I'm just going to say a term, a word, kind of like how some of our pop quizzes have been, and I just want you to say verbally, or you can write this down, what region does this go with? The New England colonies, the Mid-Atlantic colonies, or the Southern colonies? Okay, so that's what I really want you to work on right now. Let me actually just get a little bit of water, and then we'll go on there. Okay, first one, shipbuilding. Good, New England. Okay, the next one, let's go with livestock. Mid-Atlantic, awesome. How about grain? Good, Mid-Atlantic. What was the nickname for the Mid-Atlantic colonies? It was the breadbasket colonies. Good, because they literally made the baskets, okay? And then they actually literally made the bread that went into the baskets because they had the grain and they had the fertile soil that they could farm. Okay, tobacco. Southern colonies, good. How about indigo? Good, Southern colonies. Let's try a natural resource. Tell me, this is a natural resource. What region does this fit under? It would be fertile farmlands, like incredibly fertile. Good, the Southern colonies. Now, rich farmlands, you know, the soil was great, but it wasn't as great as the Southern colonies. That would be the Mid-Atlantic colonies, good. And fitting a little bit more into geography, who had hilly terrain that was full of rocks and jagged coastline? Awesome, good. That would be the New England colonies. Now, let's talk about the climate a little bit because, you know, that's an area that can really get kind of rugged, so to speak. Okay, so who had moderate summers and really cold winters? Remember, moderate we talked about kind of means average, but they had really cold winters. Who was that? Good, the New England colonies. Who had mild winters and moderate climate? So they basically had mild winters. They still had winter, okay? They had a moderate climate. Who was that? That's the Mid-Atlantic. Good. Moderate climate means average. That's the Mid-Atlantic colonies. And finally, I just want to talk about the humid climate with mild winters and hot summers. So humid goes with the Southern colonies, good. Extremely hot, but that's why they were able to produce and farm all of the products that they did. Okay, now let's briefly talk about social and political life of these 3 regions because I think that's really important and that's something that will help you go a little further. So who had town meetings? Good, the New England colonies. Who had market towns? Mid-Atlantic. What were market towns? Good. It's like a farmer's market today. That's where all the farmers would bring all of their goods and they'd sell them there, and those were the market towns, okay? Now, who had a lot of cities? You know, if I went to this region, where could I find cities that we might even know today? Kind of like our song says. Good, the Mid-Atlantic colonies. In fact, they had New York City, and they had Philadelphia, which were big cities, big areas of living. The Southern colonies, remember, we talked about, they did not have cities whatsoever. The Southern colonies were more so living in the middle of nowhere, but we looked at the pictures of the plantations, and they were the size of towns. You know, they were huge. So we talked about that. Who had counties? Good, the Southern colonies. Who had mansions? Southern colonies. Who still believed, firmly believed in the Church of England as for their religion? Good, the southern colonies. Remember, they mainly did not come over here for religious freedom. The people from the southern colonies, the reason the southern colonies were founded were for economic reasons. Okay, and the fact that the southern colonies were founded for economic reasons basically means that they were okay with the Church of England, and in fact, they still practice that here. Now, one last thing before we move on to the different roles would be, and I'm going to write this on a sheet of paper because I really want you to kind of consider this. What is the difference between specialization versus interdependence? And I feel like we should be playing the boxing music. So specialization versus interdependence. What's the difference here? Okay, so what I want you to do right now, and you can pause the video to do this, is actually to write. And you could do it this simply. You could say New England, Mid-Atlantic, and Southern. NMS. What did New England specialize in? What did the Mid-Atlantic colonies specialize in? And what did the Southern colonies specialize in? Okay. And then remember interdependence. Remember one of the multiple intelligences on the back wall of the classroom is actually interdependent. Okay. And it has all the hands inside of it. And remember our skits that we made. Okay, if you're interdependent on someone, that means because they specialized in goods, and if I live in the New England colonies, I might only be making, say, barrels in the cooper shop. Well, I'm going to need other supplies because maybe I don't have everything I need in the New England colonies. So interdependence, remember, basically meant that the folks were two or more people depending on each other for goods and services. Okay, and specialization was simply focusing on one or more products, one or few products. Okay, so they're, like Mr. Reichert, how I told you that I can teach kindergarten through 6th grade. That's kind of the same way with the people who lived in the colonies. They could do a select number of things, mainly because of the resources that they lived around. Okay, because those had a huge bearing on how they survived, to be quite honest. Okay, so specialization, interdependence, write it down, think about what they each specialized in, why were they interdependent on each other, things such as that, and that will be a great review there. Finally, well, we actually have two more things that I want to cover before you go. The first one would simply be talking about the roles of different people in the colonies, okay? And remember, we actually had skits for this as well. So what I actually want you to do, and this is what I probably would do on paper, and since I do not have flashcards with me right now, so here's what I'm going to do. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 different roles. So what I am literally going to do, guys, is take a sheet of paper, divide it into 6. I'm going to rip it apart into flashcards. Okay, now, you did make that foldable in class, and that foldable is great to go over the different roles of colonial people. Now, what I have here are now 6 cards, and what I'm basically going to do on each of them, and you don't even have to write the definition on the back. Okay, I'm going to write what role we're talking about, because remember, I mean, if you lived in the colonies between 1600 and 1750, your role depended greatly on who you were. Okay, if you were a woman, if you were a man, if you were an enslaved African American, if you were an indentured servant, that depended greatly. So we have large landowner would be number 1. I'm going to write that down. You may need to pause if you have to. The next one would be farmers. And in parentheses, I'm going to write small, because we're not talking about the plantation owners here. Okay, the large landowners are the guys who own the plantations. The farmers are the people who just farm for their own family. Okay, the next one is artisans. Remember, that includes people such as the blacksmith, the cooper, anybody who was a skilled craftsman, somebody who made something. And then we had women. Think about Anne Bradstreet, who came to visit the class. And then we have enslaved African Americans. Right there. And finally, we have indentured servants. And if you remember way back to the beginning of our unit in math when I had you draw, you had the envelope, and you had to sit on the area that you were assigned, and the indentured servants were crammed on the boat because they couldn't afford to come over, and the governors and the large landowners, they were living the life on the boat coming over to the new colonies. Okay? So what I want you to do with these, you can do a couple of things based, again, once again, on your learning style. This is something that I created in no time. Okay, they don't look pretty. I didn't even use scissors. I just created some cards, and these are going to help me to make sure I know what the role of each of these people was in colonial society. Okay, so indentured servants. A couple things you could do here. Mr. Reichard personally, you know, guys, when I went through college and high school, a couple things that really helped me would just be a bulleted list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down everything I know about indentured servants. Well, I know that they were men, women, and children. They had no money. And so basically they agreed to work for about 7 years for someone, and then they were given freedom. Okay, and we talked about how the men were given a horse and a pair of clothes when they were released. Okay, so basically what I did on this card was I actually took indentured servants on one side, and on the other side is just simply, guys, a bulleted list of everything that I want to study there. Now, you don't need anyone to help you with this, but even if you had somebody at home to help you, they could flip it around. You would see indentured servant, they would see this, okay, or you could cover it up, and they could say who agreed to work for about 7 years. Okay, they were men, women, children, they had no money. And it could be kind of like a little quiz show. So it's really up to you. Maybe you want to put pictures on the back, anything you possibly want to do to make sure you have all of these roles down. Now, you may want to pause right now to actually make those cards that will help you to study. And then I'm just going to give you a little quiz real quick, out loud, once again, that you can answer. And it's a way for me to help you study a little bit at home. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to list a characteristic of one of the roles in colonial society, okay? And I want you to tell me who that would be. Are you ready? Okay. These people worked as caretakers, houseworkers, and homemakers. They were not allowed to vote. And they also had few opportunities to get an education. Who were they? Good. Those were the women of colonial society. These folks worked as craftsmen in towns and on plantations, and they lived in small villages and cities. Who were these folks? Good. The artisans, okay? Can you name a couple of the different artisans that maybe lived in colonial society? Remember all the pictures that I showed you? Good. The blacksmith, the cooper, okay, the shoemaker, all of those different people would be artisans or skilled craftsmen. Okay, these folks worked on the land according to the region where they lived, and they relied on family members for labor. That's a key right there, guys. They relied on family members for labor. Who would that be? Good. Just small-time farmers. We're not talking about big landowners yet, okay? These people were captured in native Africa and sold to slave traders. Then they were shipped to the colonies where they were sold into slavery. They were owned as property for life without any rights. And people who were often born into slavery, you know, the children of these people were slaves themselves. Those, of course, are the enslaved African Americans. How about this one? These people were women and children who did not have money for passage to the colonies and who agreed to work without pay for the person who paid for their passage. They were free at the end of their contract. Who were these folks? Good, the indentured servants. Okay, so that's basically going through and studying the things that we've talked about in class, guys. These cards are a great, great tool to use to study. Now, one last topic that I want to cover before I wrap up and send you on your own would include Great Britain's relationship with the colonies. And we filled out a graphic organizer last time we were in class together. I think it was last Thursday, but I may be wrong. And I just want to talk about the economic relationships versus the political relationships between the colonies and Great Britain. So I'm literally going to make a T-chart, just like that. Okay. And on one side, I'm going to write economic. And on the other side, I'm going to write political. Now, I'm going to go down through, and I just want you to write either this is economic or this is political. Remember, economic, you can do this to help you if you need, is money. Political, I like to draw a king's crown because political is government. Okay? Things that, you know, the control, taxes, things like that. Okay. Now, the colonies traded raw materials for manufactured goods in Great Britain. Now, this is something that Great Britain did to the colonies. So the colonists were forced to trade only with Great Britain. Okay? Is that economic or is that political? So they were forced to trade only with Great Britain, economic or political. Write that down. Good, that's economic. Why was that economic? Because Great Britain and the colonies became interdependent with one another. You know, they became interdependent. Great Britain needed things that the colonies made. The colonies needed things that Great Britain made. Here's another one. Great Britain imposed strict control over trade, just like our song said. Economic or political? Good, that's economic. Now, and here's the reasoning. They wanted to be a world power. So in the American colonies, Great Britain's desire to remain a world power resulted in a conflict with the French, known as the French and Indian War. And remember, we said that the French and Indian War, the two sides were not the French and the natives or the Indians, okay? It was really France against Great Britain. Great Britain was after power, and France was up in Canada, remember, okay? So, Great Britain imposed strict control over the colonies. That's an economic reason, and that kind of ties in what we just talked about. Finally, Great Britain taxed the colonies after the French and Indian War. Is that economic or political? Great Britain taxed their own colonies after the French and Indian War. Good, that's economic. Why is that? Because they needed to raise money to pay for the cost of the war. So basically what they said was, hey, colonists, yes, you belong to Great Britain. We need money to pay for the war that we just fought, and guess what? You're going to pay for it. So that was economic. Okay? A couple more. The colonists had no representation in Parliament over in Great Britain. Is that economic or political? Good, that's political. So the colonists had no say over in Great Britain, over in the motherland. They had no say in any of the policies. Some colonists resented the power of the colonial governor. So you have these governors in the colonies, in Pennsylvania, in Massachusetts, in New Hampshire, in Rhode Island. Okay? And the colonists resented that. That means they hated it. They hated the power that those colonial governors had. That's political. Great Britain wanted strict control over the colonial legislatures, which are the people who made the laws here in the colonies. That is also political. Okay? So Great Britain said, we want to control your every move. We want to kind of make people seem like they're making their own their laws, but in the end we are. Okay, here's another one. The colonies opposed the British taxes. That's political. Good. Okay, so those are the reasons, basically, guys, that these tensions started to build. Economic and political. Economic, Great Britain said, we want you only to trade with us, and we're going to start taxing your goods. Political, Great Britain said, we want to really control all that's going on over in the colonies because we don't want to lose you. Great Britain wanted to become that world power that it kind of never was able to totally take control of due to France and Spain. Now, a couple of other things that I want to show you guys. I know this was a long study session, but in the very end, so if you turn in all of those papers that you just completed, that's 8 house points, okay? In the very end of the book, you're going to find the review, section 4. It begins on page 220, and it ends on page 223. You can get yourself 5 house points if you complete this, and this answer key right now is on our Class Fusion page. Under the Files, Social Studies, it says Unit 4. The answer key's here. As always, make sure you use the answer key after you have completed it, or it is useless to you in helping you to study. You're just wasting your time. Okay? And for sticking out this very long study session because we have so much to learn. If you, when you bring me all your materials for your house points and show me your book, that's normally what we do in class. If you tell me this code word, it's 2 words, code word, you'll get yourself 3 more house points. And it's top secret because you've stuck it out for the whole video. It is Great Britain. Okay, so that's 3 extra house points for sticking this very long study video out. But I'm so glad that you're taking the initiative to study this at home. And I hope what you're finding is you're like, Mr. Record, I really don't need you anymore to study. I have these techniques, I have these ideas that will really help me to study at home on my own. That's my goal, okay? But that's okay if you still need me because I'll keep making them. And I hope by the end of the year, you're able to get to that point where you're like, I'm comfortable in studying on my own, okay? So, I'm so proud of you guys. Rock stars, you are going to rock this test. If you have any questions, things that are still a little cloudy for this unit, please do not hesitate to just email me or ask me in school, guys, okay? I will see you whenever we're back from this snow, but study on.